Hi, and welcome to another episode of Shane Plays Geek Talk. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for pressing play. This week, we're going to be talking with Levi Combs, who is not only an RPG publisher, tabletop RPG publisher under the Planet X Games banner, but more importantly, for this episode, he's also a huge fan of Grindhouse cinema. Now, some of you probably know exactly what Grindhouse cinema is. Others of you may not, but that's what we're going to be talking about in today's episode with Levi. Some of the stuff that you can look forward to hearing is what is Grindhouse and why is it called that? The market forces that led to the rise of Grindhouse theaters. Gritty movies, violent movies, foreign movies, exploitation movies, kung fu movies, BRUCEsploitation movies, and more. New York City as a character in movies. Sho'nuff, the Shogun of Harlem, can choose scenery on a level with Darth Vader. What's Levi's favorite fight scene in any movie, period? Is the first Friday the 13th movie a Grindhouse movie? Plus the RPG adventures and zines of Planet X Games. Hear the call of the skeleton and the Black Lake and behold the Big Eye Chungus. And on that note, if you're just here for the Grindhouse portion of the episode, then you can jump to about 15 minutes in, because the majority of the episode is about Grindhouse cinema, but we spend a little time at the beginning talking about what Levi does with his tabletop RPG publishing, because that's how we met, and I wanted to definitely give him a chance to help promote that stuff. Finally, I just wanted to throw a note out there that every now and then I'll do everything I can before an episode starts recording to make sure that the audio sounds good. And then when I am finished recording and I'm checking everything out, I'm like, that doesn't sound as good as I want it to. So Levi's audio in this episode sounds crisp and fantastic. Mine is not as good as I want it to be in many points. It's still listenable. It's just not the quality that I would prefer to put out on a podcast. So I've done what I could to help clean it up, and rest assured that I do take quality of my audio seriously. You know, I test a lot beforehand, so I've got to track down and see where that's happening, because it's not the first time it's happened in one of my episodes. So, I want to start mentioning as a point, the previous episode before this one, if you missed it, was episode 258 with Mongoose and Meerkat author Jim Breyfogle, where we get into some swords and sorcery, pulp fiction, adventure fiction type writing with author Jim Breyfogle. So make sure to check that out too. But anyway, this week we're talking with Levi Combs about Grindhouse cinema. And now, on with the show.
Shall we play a game?
Why, yes. I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Getting geeky all up in your podcast. It's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks for pressing play for another dose of just all-around geeky goodness. Today I've got a cool guest that we're going to cover a couple of topics with. One being his work with role-playing games, tabletop role-playing game stuff. But two, we're going to be talking about Grindhouse cinema, which I thought I knew what Grindhouse was, but over the past, I don't know, couple of years, I've been disabused of what I thought Grindhouse was, and since following my guest on Twitter, I've been even further disabused of what I thought Grindhouse was. So, with no further ado, we're going to be talking with Levi Combs of Planet X Games. Planet X Games is the banner that he does his role-playing game stuff under, but then also he's just a massive Grindhouse cinema aficionado, if you were. Are we allowed to use big, fancy words when talking about Grindhouse, Levi?
I would call myself a Grindhouse geek, if anything.
Geek, okay. You're Grindhouse geek. Yeah, that's better. So, anyway, welcome to the show, Levi. Thanks so much for coming on Shane Plays Geek Talk.
No, man, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and just so people know, Levi just finished a mighty battle with some fajitas. So you were laid out for like 24 hours, man.
A little food poisoning.
were those home fajitas, or do you want to mention the place where the fajitas originated from? Was it a chain? Where did this fajitas come from?
Sadly, it was a local spot that I frequent often, but might have to back off a little bit.
Yeah. Well, usually the local spots are the best, but it's going to happen. We've all failed our Constitution saving throw on occasion against delicious food that left us laid out for like 24 hours. So were you having like at least those good like fever dreams and hallucinations? Did you get anything good out of it?
Zero. I got nothing good out of it. Literally just laying in bed wishing I hadn't eaten those fajitas.
Yeah. Did you shake your fist at a cloud?
Every time.
Every time? All right. Yeah. All right. Food poison man shakes fist at fate, at the cloud for the fate that's been delivered upon him. All right. Well, anyway, so we're going to talk mainly about Grindhouse today because that's a fantastic topic that deserves a show of its own. But before we do all that, I do want to talk about Planet X Games, and I also want to give a shout out, of course, to North Texas RPG Con. I think I connected with you because of North Texas, probably through like the Facebook group, and then I started following your Twitter and just got to know who you were through there. But I want to give a shout out that this past North Texas RPG Con that was last week of May, first couple of days of June. Of course, and listeners may not know, but they hear me talking about North Texas RPG Con a lot. In fact, I've dedicated an entire show to it at one point. Was the founder, Doug Ray, passed away over the past year. So he was not physically at this most recent North Texas RPG Con, but he was there in spirit for sure. People definitely talked about him a lot, remembered him. They had a very nice behind the check-in counter, a very nice setup, remembering Doug. But what I wanted to point out was evidently Doug did a lot of the coordination for the con. He did a lot of stuff. So this year, Michael Battalato and Gary Oliver stepped up, and I thought they did a wonderful job.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah, and I saw them having some discussions where I could tell they were having to work stuff out that popped up, because this stuff always happens when you throw a big event. You got to solve problems. So, they in the background, they may have been sweating it, but I thought it was great. I thought it was probably my favorite North Texas that I've been to so far. That was my third. And I heard other people saying it was a really good one too. So I just want to give a shout out to those guys because I know they worked their tails off to make it happen.
Yeah,
so.
North Texas is it's my favorite con, hands down. Like I go to about 6 cons a year, and the North Texas RPG Con is just far and away my favorite. It's almost like you're going back to like an old like family reunion, or you're just hitting up a high school reunion with people you like.
They keep it small and intimate on purpose. They won't go more than 500 tickets sold.
Right.
Which I like. I'm a very big fan of that. It's like you said, it's like a family reunion. It's just fun, and I've been going there enough now and staying engaged with like the Facebook community and whatnot that now I feel like that I'm seeing, like I'm building those connections and running into people, and so I'm getting some of that sort of family reunion vibe too. But anyway, I just wanted to give a shout out to Michael Battalato and Gary Oliver, because that's a lot of work. So I just wanted to give them a shout out that not only did I have a fantastic time at this most recent con, but I heard other people expressing similar sentiments. Let's talk about Planet X Games. So Levi, tell us a little bit about what you do in gaming, in the gaming industry under the banner Planet X Games.
So Planet X Games it originally started. I was just trying to get my foot in the door with gaming companies. I talked to a few people. I didn't really know very many people that were in the business. I hate to call it an industry; it's more of a hobby. I just didn't know very many people that were in it. The one person I did know was Casey Christopherson. He's the art director and one of the most prolific writers for Frog God Games and Necromancer Games. So he's done a ton of work for them. He did City of Brass, and he did the Encephalon Gorges on the Moon. He did the Haunted Highlands for the Troll Lords. He's just done a ton of stuff. I think he has like 80 or 90 RPG credits to his name. but I had met him at a con in Tulsa, Oklahoma, like I don't know, back in the early 2000s, and we just hit it off, and we just kind of always kept in contact. So I had an idea for a module, and I had most of it written out, and I was just kind of looking for advice or somebody to kind of put eyes on it. And Casey looked at it, and he was like, "Hey man, this is good. You should definitely publish this." And I'm like, "Oh well, I'm not a publisher. I have no idea." He goes, "Well, why don't you just put it on Kickstarter?" And my response was, "What's a Kickstarter?" Yeah, so it really goes back to that. Casey was my mentor. And he was just the guy that picked up the phone, when I had those questions at 10 o'clock at night, or I was freaking out about my budget, or, whatever. He was just always the guy to pick up the phone and be real calm about what he was telling me. And through him, I got to meet some other folks who also gave me good advice. Matt Finch gave me really good advice, Jeff Talanian, and just a couple other folks. They were just really, really helpful in helping me get started. And now it's just adventures and zines, and they span everything from the OSR all the way to 5th edition to Dungeon Crawl Classics. I've even done a couple system agnostic zines, which I really, really enjoyed. But yeah, we play this games. It's more of a cinematic take on role playing. So if you like for an OSR product, you've got your framework of rules, but like, how can we take that and how can we make it just a little bit more cinematic? How can it be a little bit more action packed? And I don't mean that necessarily in the frame of like, combat or rolling dice, but just like, let's just see what we can do to spice that up. How do we present it a little bit better? How do we make the flow of play a little bit easier? And that's all that is.
So speaking of the phylactery, I have a couple of issues here.
Oh, sweet. Thank you.
Yeah, I supported them either through, I guess, Kickstarter or Indiegogo. I'm assuming Kickstarter. I got issues. It's the issue. I got the NT RPG exclusive where there's a big D20 on the front.
Yes. Number 2.
And then I've got like a skeletal knight. I know Ed Bickford did one of these. Ed Bickford did the cover of the sort of skeletal knight, and the other one, the cover is Tony Avina. So I got to give a shout out to Ed. I'm pretty sure, although looking through these, I've loved looking at them. And they've got good material, great art. But I think Ed Bickford was pushing the phylactery, which is why I supported it before I even realized that it was connected with you. So we can give Ed a little thumbs up on that one.
I think he's the guy I've done the most work with. Between all of, I think I have 13 books out now, and I think he has the most covers and the most interiors of anybody I've worked with. So if you can't tell, I'm a big fan of Ed. Yeah, no, Ed's a cool guy. Actually, I had him on within the past year, I think, after I met him at the last North Texas RPG Con and talked with him and kept in touch with him since then. But yeah, so talking about the phylactery, this zine, stuff to kind of give an idea of what you might find. Strange things that live underground, weird critters, worm polyps from the void beyond, an undead gut pile, brood hive of the slime god. It doesn't get any better than that. Brood hive of the slime god. 1d10 tough SOBs, roadhouse hoodlums, bored adventurers, and mean old bastards you might meet in a tavern. So, and the art's great, the style's great. It's not all old school, but it has that kind of gritty feel. So anyway, that's the phylactery. Then you have another zine called Ray Guns and Robots. Yeah, right? I've got a ton of zines, but Ray Guns and Robots is one of them. That's one of the system agnostic zines. It's kind of like my love letter to pulp sci-fi and old school vintage, like atomic sci-fi. And something really that was born out of all this extra artwork that Ed had laying around. Like, he had been doing this robot pulp comic for a long time. He just had a bunch of this killer artwork, and I was like, hey man, we should do a zine together. You do the art and I'll do the words. And it really worked out.
And then it looks like that you are about to kickstart. It says the skeleton of the Black Lake calls for thee. 3 curses for Sister Saren. which is obviously a play on Three Mules for Sister Sarah, right?
Well,
Launches on Kickstarter soon. So tell us a little bit about that. When is that Kickstarter going to hit?
So that'll probably be in September. I'll actually have another one coming before then.
Okay, what is that?
We were going to put it on Indiegogo, but then Kickstarter announced that they wanted to do Zine Quest, like out of nowhere, for August. You can do a Zine Quest in August and another one in February. So we're like, I guess we're going to do something cool in August because I like I said, I had it earmarked for Indiegogo actually for this Tuesday, but we switched it over to August, and that's a project called Big Eye Chungus.
Big Eye Chungus.
And all I can really say about it is that it's about the coolest monster that has ever floated its way through a dungeon and blasted you to pieces with its eye rays.
Right. Yeah. Probably, one of the most well-known and iconic types of monsters besides a dragon. So.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about, man. I mean, honestly, it's it's a Big Eye Chungus. I don't.
Yeah, it's a Big Eye Chungus. It's a Chungus Among Us that has big eyes.
I would only say that you should behold this zine when it hits the hands.
Yeah. Behold the scene when it launches. All right, so Big Eye Chungus will be coming before Three Curses for Sister Sarah. Anyway, folks, check out Planet X Games. What's the best way that you like people to follow Planet X Games?
I'm all over social media. You can follow me on Facebook at Planet X Games, Twitter at Planet X Games Co, as in company, CO. And then on Instagram, I have a pretty regularly updated feed just called "It Came from Beyond Planet X."
It came from Beyond Planet X, and then website-wise, you've got some stuff up on DriveThruRPG, and then I found a collection of your products on theexaltedfuneral.com or exaltedfuneral.com. Yeah. So is that the closest thing you have to an actual website?
Yeah, so the web store is Exalted Funeral. They have all of our latest stuff up.
Okay.
Obviously, things go out to backers first, and then we give a little bit of a 2 or 3 week grace period so that people who ordered from out of the country get their copies before we offer it to anybody else. But once everybody has their copies, everything goes up on Exalted Funeral, and they're really, really good about getting product out quickly and getting promoting, and they're great partners. DriveThruRPG, there's a few things on there, a few of my earliest things, but I stopped using them quite a while ago. I haven't actually updated or used.
Yeah, it looked like there was only about 3 products on there, if I remember right. So, okay.
Yeah, it's the earliest stuff.
And folks, just to remind you, so it's Planet X Games, Levi Combs. I've got a copy of the Phylactery magazine here. I just randomly opened the page. It said Secrets from the Lich's Crypt, a whole bunch of weird old crap in a dead wizard's lab. A Rod of Keening Death. Now, if that does, and a Ring of Eldritch Might. And then on a further page, we have Malug, the Bloated One. Now, if that doesn't get you excited, I can't help you. So, all right. So check out Planet X Games. And they got upcoming cool stuff and all kinds of madness. But what we're really here to talk about, and I can have you on in the future and we can talk exclusively Planet X. But you were keen, and I was keen to have you talk about Grindhouse cinema. So, all right, let's talk about, okay, so this is an interesting topic because it's one of those things people will differ what they either think Grindhouse is or the quote-unquote official definitions of what Grindhouse is. It's a style. It's an era. It's all these different things. There's movies now that might come out. Somebody could say, well, that's a Grindhouse movie.
Well, all those answers are correct.
Well, that's the thing. That's the point. So it's both wonderfully inclusive, but also slippery. So let's just get that out on the front end. But I'm gonna throw a couple of definitions out here, none of which are accurate, all of which are. Okay. So Merriam-Webster, remember in the old days before where they would say, ask Mr. Webster, the definition of Grindhouse is an often shabby movie theater having continuous showings, especially of pornographic or violent films. Now, I don't think we'll definitely be focusing on violent films today. I don't think we're going to be focusing on pornographic films.
Well, that definition is pretty correct, actually.
Yeah. Well, for what Grindhouse, like if you think of in the 70s, like Times Square had all those little movie theaters that were showing stuff. Yes,
exactly.
Yeah, that's Grindhouse. Okay.
42nd Street.
Right. Grindhouse can be like the type of theater, but then also the kind of movie. All right. Wikipedia talks about the origins of the term. And there's a historian named David Church, and he said this theater type was named after the quote-unquote grind policy, a film programming strategy dating back to the early 1920s, which continuously showed films at cut-rate ticket prices that typically rose over the course of each day. And then finally, Wiktionary, which is like a open-source dictionary, I guess, play on Wikipedia, it's got a couple of options of where it came from. Perhaps the grinding or cranking motion employed by early projectionists, and perhaps from bump and grind, which they say this is a dubious possibility. It says the term may originally have been used for burlesque houses in the 1940s, and it was used in at least one instance to describe a burlesque house. But from what I understand, the most common understanding is for quite a time, 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe a little bit of the 80s, you had these theaters that would just grind as many movies through them as they could. It may only run there for a day or two, if that, but they would show multiple different movies per day and just low-cost, low-budget movies, grind as many of them in there and get people to come in and buy cheap tickets and make money on volume. That's what I understand is probably the most common accepted thing, is that thing of Grindhouse. Now, having said all that, what is your definition? Where do you think the term came from, Levi?
Well, no, it's all pretty close to that. To my understanding, a grindhouse, the term grindhouse, comes from exactly what you said. With you'd have these shabby, low-rent theaters all across the country, but they really grew in prominence. They got really well known for being Times Square, 42nd Street area in New York. But they would have exploitation films, violent films, very genre-specific films, and really just very cheaply made movies that they could get for cheap. So while across the city, somebody might be showing Star Wars or Jaws or something like that. Well, on 42nd Street, they were showing Exterminator 2, or they were showing,
I Spit on Your Grave, or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. No, but you have I've heard the notion that they were called grindhouses because of the pornographic films and the women grinding on however you want to put it. But that's I don't believe that's accurate. Everything that I've read kind of counteracts that terminology, and I don't really think that's the terminology that they would have used. That doesn't sound accurate for the period to me.
Yeah, I mean, I just think of it as, I think the most accurate thing is grinding through as many cheap movies as they could. That's kind of how I think of it. But and another, if you want to capture the atmosphere of now a grindhouse movie is different from a grindhouse theater. But if you want to capture that essence of a grindhouse theater, there's that scene in Taxi Driver.
Yep, that's it.
Where Robert De Niro asks, that's not Sybil Shepherd. Who is that's in the movie? Anyway,
it is Sybil Shepherd.
Is it Sybil Shepherd? He asks her out for a date. She says yes, and he takes her into this, cheap little movie theater, and they're basically showing a porno, and she gets up and leaves. That's a grindhouse theater,
Yes. No, that's not saying that all grindhouse theaters showed pornography.
Right, but it's that type of cheap little.
Yeah, you could expect if you went to a grindhouse theater in, say, the late 70s, you could expect to see a junkie nodding off in the corner, people just smoking in the theater. You'd see, prostitutes come in with their johns. It was not a sanitary or clean place by any stretch of the imagination, but it was in that. It was in that pre-Giuliani cleanup of the '90s. That's when all that stuff's gone now. That's long gone. But before that cleanup, when Times Square was truly a dangerous place. Like, I don't know if you'd ever in your travels as a younger man, if you'd ever made your way there before Times Square got cleaned up.
I have not, but between movies, pop culture, comic books, and reading history, I know it was a rough place. So
yeah, it's just a dangerous place. Getting mugged was not uncommon, but you would.
Yeah. Hey, I saw Death Wish. I know what it was like. The only person who could walk around boldly in Times Square with no fear was Jason Voorhees. So anybody else, you had to watch it. So
that's a good.
Yeah, that was definitely pre-Giuliani Times Square, that little sequence in Jason Takes Manhattan. Even though most of Jason Takes Manhattan happens on a boat, we're only in Manhattan for about 15 minutes. But anyway, my childhood wasn't ruined. I'm not bitter. Actually, I like that movie. I love that movie, actually. Where else can you watch a boxing match where Jason boxes the guy's head off? Okay,
you can see that in. You could actually see that in Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
I haven't watched that since I was a teenager. I remember watching that in high school. I need to see it again.
It's gloriously amazing. It still holds up. It's still awesome.
Yeah, I remember.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah, I remember like the Killer Cotton Candy and all kinds of crazy, and the shadow puppet. It's
still an amazing movie. Yeah. If anything deserves a remake or deserves like a very late sequel or like a team up with another franchise, get like Killer Clowns versus Evil Dead or Killer Clowns versus Jason or something. That would be my
Killer Clowns versus It. Killer Clowns versus is it Terrifier that is kind of a clown looking killer?
Yeah, Art the Clown.
Killer Clowns versus Puppet Master. I'm down with that. Okay. So, but yeah, that would be a fun mashup to have them fight. Evil Dead, I think. Actually, Ash versus Killer Clowns. I'd pay money to see Ash versus
all day,
Killer
every
Clowns.
day. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, shop smart, shop S-smart. Okay, we talked a little bit about what Grindhouse, where the term came from. Another sort of historical point was that used to, like, theaters were these amazing experiences where it was like they incredibly lavish and curtains and ushers and this really nice experience. Well, one of the reasons for the rise of Grindhouse was TV.
Yep.
Theaters started having to compete with TV. So you've got a theater that needs to stay in business, so it changes its business model. So that was not the only reason, but one of the reasons for the rise of Grindhouse was I can just set my butt at home and watch TV. So
you had all these luxurious theaters that were no longer being taken care of down in the heart of New York City, and that's not free rent. They got to figure out some way to pay the nut. So.
And here's another. This doesn't have to do with Grindhouse, but this is trivia as long as we're talking about movies. From what I understand, the reason that popcorn got so popular is because during the Great Depression, one of the main things that people like to do is go to the movies, and it was a cheap treat. So that I've heard that's one of the reasons why we associate popcorn with movies.
Oh, I never heard that. It makes sense.
Anyway, so let's talk about actual Grindhouse movies. Now, here's what surprised me, because you and I have talked on Twitter a couple of times. I'm like, oh, I never thought of that as a Grindhouse movie, and you're like, nope, that's definitely Grindhouse. So I always thought of Grindhouse as basically cheap, grainy exploitation movies for the most part, right? And so I started digging through lists of what are considered some of the best Grindhouse movies out there. And there's some on there that I considered independent, but I never thought of them as Grindhouse. So I'll give you some examples that surprised me. Halloween, 1978. Yep. Never thought of that as Grindhouse. You know, I always think of Grindhouse as like, because I remember Halloween being a big movie that everybody talked about, right?
It didn't start out that way, but it became that. A lot like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It started out as this little independent film that nobody was watching, and then when people saw it, the word of mouth became so contagious that it spread, and then they got huge.
Right. So, because I can remember like being in elementary school and like walking to school and all the kids talking about Halloween, right? I can remember it just, you know, I would not have classified that as Grindhouse. So there's always more to learn, which is why I like to do these shows. I would have thought, before I started doing deeper research, I would have thought as Grindhouse as a fun little movie that totally forgettable, but it was fun for the moment that I watched it, like a piece of bubble gum, right? Quick little entertainment, move on. But there's some movies in Grindhouse that are considered Grindhouse that I think are very powerful movies. Here's another movie that surprises me that it's considered Grindhouse, and that's Dawn of the Dead.
Mm-hmm.
Because A, that's Romero, so I hold Romero way up there, you know, especially on his original trilogy. And I mean, I guess I would have thought of that as independent, but again, not necessarily Grindhouse. Like, I don't see that as a cheap throwaway movie. One, because I love zombie movies, and I think it's probably the best zombie movie ever made, in my opinion. Even surpassing Night of the Living Dead, which I love dearly. But it's also got a powerful message about consumerism and the emptiness of people's lives, right? That whole mall with the zombies walking around the mall. I mean, Romero is making some very powerful messages there. So it's not just some cheap bubblegum, I watched it once, I forgot about it kind of movie. And then the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Again, I wouldn't have thought of that as Grindhouse, but now that I think about it, like Tobe Hooper made that on like a really small budget, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the amount of fame a movie gets shouldn't relate to whether it's Grindhouse or not. That's something that I need to adjust in my personal definition. So another movie that I wouldn't consider Grindhouse, because I don't think it was an easy movie to make. I don't think of it as low budget. And it's a very powerful movie, is Cannibal Holocaust. That I wouldn't have thought of as Grindhouse. Because I don't, you know, that could not have been an easy, cheap movie to make, in my opinion, because they had to film it in both the city and they had to film it in the Amazon, or maybe they were using other locations to look like the Amazon. But that had a super powerful message in it, you know, about the twist where you think that it's just these college kids that got in trouble, but the college kids were really the monsters. So, but anyway, those are some examples that I was like, wow, that I didn't really thought of those as Grindhouse. Now, a movie that makes a lot of lists that I'm like, yeah, that's totally Grindhouse is Death Race 2000. To me, that's perfect. That's a perfect example of Grindhouse, would be Death Race 2000.
That's a good one.
It feels cheaply made, but it's a lot of fun, and it's over the top in its violence and everything. You know, like Frankenstein goes for the doctors to get more points instead of the patients that they're setting out for him, you know, that kind of thing. With me throwing just those movies out, like Gator Bait, that's another movie that I enjoy, that I'm like, okay, that's definitely a Grindhouse movie, is Gator Bait. And then I threw another one in here. I was kind of making a list of stuff that, you know, for my list of Grindhouse favorites, I had started working on it. It's not comprehensive. I put Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Death Race 2000, Gator Bait, and then I did an honorable mention of Zombie, which I don't love Zombie as much as a lot of people do, but the shark fight, there's no other movie where you have a zombie fighting a shark, and that's big stuff. So Zombie made my honorable mention list for that. So, you know, why don't you give us some examples, or, you know, what you think of is a Grindhouse movie, and give us some examples of your favorites.
Well, there's a lot to unpack from what you just said. Let me backtrack just a little bit. So if you go to Grindhouse Cinema Database, which is one of the most popular,
right? I'm on I have their top 20 pulled up.
Right. If you go to Grindhouse Cinema Database, you'll see movies that fit just fit the aesthetic of Grindhouse, stuff that came either earlier or later when the actual movies were being pushed through actual grindhouses, which kind of ends at 85, 86. That's kind of when a lot of those films, a lot of those places started to disappear. But you see not only those kind of films, but you see ones that have the aesthetic or have like the homage and the vibe of Grindhouse. And then you see stuff that is can be considered Grindhouse, but it's exploitation or very genre specific material. Like you mentioned, gator bait. Gator bait comes from what they call exploitation, which would just be basically a whole series, definitive era of movies where the villains or the protagonists were rednecks or hillbillies, or like a good example of that sort of film would be like Hills Have Eyes, right, or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or it's just little what is it, the Spider Baby?
Yeah, and the Hills Have Eyes. That's a hard movie for me to watch. I watch a lot of horror movies, and they don't bother me, but that one gets under my skin. The Hills Have Eyes is they're just that normal little suburban family, caught out in the middle of all that. It's just awful, and it's like, I don't know. There's something about the Hills Have Eyes that gets me. That's all I can say.
Yeah, there's a lot of different kind of movies that you could put under the umbrella that is Grindhouse. When we start talking about subgenres, you get into stuff like nunsploitation, where it's right. The protagonist is a nun, or there's like heavy themes of Catholicism, and like I said, you had Hicksploitation. There's Cannibalsploitation, which Cannibal Holocaust obviously falls into, but so does something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre again.
Well, let me stop you there. I want to make a point to see like where you think the line of Grindhouse begins and ends. So I think it was Eli Roth made The Green Inferno, which have you seen that?
I have.
Okay. In some ways, that's kind of Cannibal Holocaust. But would you consider the Green Inferno Grindhouse? See, I consider Green Inferno to have much more modern budget and sensibilities. And while the story itself might be Grindhouse-ish, with some of the awful, brutal stuff that happens in it, I don't really consider it a Grindhouse movie. But how would you consider it?
Well, it again depends on what you consider to be a Grindhouse movie. Like, is it just a movie with Grindhouse aesthetics? Is it a movie that was produced to be played in actual Grindhouses between this date and this date? Right. Is it a homage film that is obviously riffing off of a previous film? Is it a remake? There's all kinds of different things that fall under that umbrella. Now, if you look at that cinema, the Grindhouse Cinema Database, you'll see that they kind of put everything underneath that umbrella, and that includes just B movies in general, but also stuff that could be considered basically like kind of the trashy VHS sort of releases that you would see in your neighborhood VHS rental place. But when you talk about Eli Roth's Green Inferno, that's a special case, I think, because Eli Roth, again, one of the directors that helped bring back the enthusiasm and the interest in Grindhouse, along with obviously like Quentin Tarantino. But then he has specifically said, hey, this is my reimagining of Cannibal Holocaust, because he was incredibly influenced by Cannibal Holocaust. So when he did Green Inferno,
that's what I'm saying. Cannibal Holocaust is a very powerful movie. It is a disturbing movie, but it's got a lot of brutality in it. It also has like a message, because everyone thinks that this was like these 4 college filmmakers, they're lost with these awful savages. It's terrible. And then when the real truth comes out, I mean, it makes you think. And so, like I said, it's a Grindhouse era movie for sure. It's got Grindhouse sensibilities, but it Cannibal Holocaust, I would, despite its awful brutality, and there's a lot of brutality in it, I don't consider it a throwaway piece of bubblegum entertainment. And it's also, for me, I'm a huge found footage fan guy.
I'll back you up right there. I would not. I mean, I see that you're putting Grindhouse films into the throwaway piece of bubblegum entertainment. I would call VHS trash.
Right.
That's what I would call that. But there are so many Grindhouse films that are very impactful and very, and not even the ones that we've been talking about, but so many that are just really, really deal with a lot of very mature themes. And had they been in the hands of maybe just a slightly better director or had a bigger budget, maybe you would have seen or heard more out of them. But there's some films out there, man, that'll given their context, will just shock you to the core.
Can you think of any examples off the top of your head?
Yeah, I was just thinking of, it's so silly to think about, but there's a movie called Exterminator. Yeah. And it's about a guy who comes back from the Vietnam War, and he's got a flamethrower and he's killing criminals. He's kind of a riff off Death Wish, right? But you think about Death Wish, that was another movie that didn't immediately gain that crazy popularity. But if you start going through those lists of movies and start, I forget there's a lot of they call them blaxploitation films, but they're just genre specific films that were made with black directors and black actors that are some of them are again have those really, really mature themes, and some of them are fantastic. They're just like any other genre. You got your good ones and your bad ones, but I mean, I challenge you to sit down and watch The Mac or Willie Dynamite and not come away with something, because some of these movies are just these exploitation movies. They maybe they didn't have the right director or the right budget, or maybe they didn't have a great big they didn't have a huge budget for actors, but what came out of that was just this genuine glimpse of what the story really was, and you really get some magic on screen. So I wouldn't call them like these throwaway bubblegum things. Some of them certainly are, but I mean, if you ever watch The Warriors, you ever see that?
The Warriors?
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's a scene. There's a scene. There's a scene in The Warriors that I will hold up against any scene that's ever been in cinema ever, where the hero. The hero and his girlfriend are basically on the subway.
That is such a power. I know the exact scene you're talking about, and the fancy. I'll let you tell it, but that is a very powerful scene.
Well, I mean, if you already know it,
go ahead for the listeners. Yeah, for the listeners. So yeah, go ahead and finish it out.
I mean, it's just a great scene. You get basically the protagonists. They get onto a subway, and they're dirty and filthy. They've been people have been trying to kill them all night, and they get on the subway and the car, and then a bunch of people, I guess, coming from a disco or from a prom or something. I don't rightfully recall, but they also get on the train at the same moment, and they're sitting across from each other, and the protagonist's girlfriend, she kind of goes to kind of pull up her shirt, which has been ripped and torn because people, like I said, people have been trying to kill him the entire time, and he stops her because he's like, "Hey, there's nothing to be ashamed of. We are who we are." But they managed to convey all of that through a whole 45 seconds of just silence and just physical acting. It's fantastically directed, fantastically acted, and you can't watch that and not feel some sort of impact. It's
definitely. That's it. That's the moment where probably you stop seeing the Warriors as two-dimensional, but they're like real people that you can empathize with.
Right. So the whole movie, you got these gangs are all trying to kill, there's 40 gangs are trying to kill this one gang, and there's all this kind of silly stuff with people dressed up like, baseball teams and, the people with makeup on that are, looking like clown, whatever. There's all this kind of crazy stuff that's a metaphor for all the different kind of power plays in the New York underground at that time. But then you get this really soulful, like heavy moment, like right smack dab in the middle of the film. Where you're like, whoa, hold on. Like what did I just watch? Like, this is so powerful.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I knew immediately where you're going as soon as you brought it up. So yeah, I agree. It's very powerful. See, and that's another movie I would not have thought of as Grindhouse. Because I saw it on HBO mixed in with all the other movies, right? So to me, it just seemed like another movie. But if people have never seen The Warriors, it's an amazing movie. Of course, it has the famous scene at the end where the guy's got the bottles on his fingers and he's smacking them together and saying Warriors come out and play in that really.
You'd be surprised how many actors from that movie went on to just be in tons of other things, And that's definitely a movie that does not have any sort of modern sensibility attached to it. So, if you're listener, if you're out there watching it, there's some rough scenes to watch in that movie. So just
let's throw a caveat. Shane Plays Geek Talk. Any conversations I have on Shane Plays Geek Talk are family friendly for the most part, but some of the stuff we're talking about may not be. So,
well, that's the nature of Grindhouse in general, I think. Because those films, they're dirty and they're
raw, they're in your face,
very much. It's not sometimes not in a great way. They can be the term is exploitation film, and I mean, they are some of them, not all of them, but some of them are very exploitative. It was just the 70s, 60s, even early 80s. This is a different time, man. It was a Wild West. This is before the
and see, I grew up in it, so I'm fine with it. I miss it in some ways. Not that I want people to be exploited, but it's just part of the nostalgia and the zeitgeist that I grew up in. And there's also a freedom in being able to make movies that are raw and in your face. So to me. These are also very important titles. One of the reasons I love watching older movies and retro TV and reading old comic books and all that is because it's the closest to time travel we're ever going to get, other than reading like a historical autobiography or something, to see what the sensibilities of the day were. Or even if you watch an old movie and you see the backdrop of the street for what people are wearing and what kind of cars and the stuff that's in the display windows and all. I just love this stuff. But then you get that raw, gritty, almost dangerous. It's almost dangerous to be watching this, But you were talking about exploitation and the Warriors and some of these movies having a heart or a message that may be surprising. I was watching. It wasn't that long ago. I can't remember if it was Blackula or if it was Scream, Blackula, Scream, which of course is they took Dracula and made him black and called him Blackula, right? That's a very exploitation type thing to do. But an underlying theme of the movie was he was just trying to have a relationship with a woman and be left alone.
Yeah, I think it's almost a disservice to call it to I mean, not that this is what you're trying to do, but it's a disservice for people who would immediately think that Blackula is just Black Dracula. There's so much more to
it. No, it's very deep, right? Yeah. It's very deep, and he's struggling with things, and it's not just some little two-dimensional story. It was very powerful. He just wanted to be with his woman, and he was expressing to her the pain of his existence, and it was really good. So surprisingly strong. Another example, this isn't Grindhouse, but another example of stuff that people may think is not very powerful, but you get these moments like there's a Tom Baker Doctor Who arc. A lot of people, like, I love Classic Who, and a lot of people think of Classic Who as just cheesy old BBC stuff. But there's like an episode where Tom Baker has like the fate of the Daleks in his hands. He's literally got these two little wires, and if he puts them together, he destroys the Daleks. And he has this incredible, agonizing self-discussion where does he have the right to do this, and all of it. And it's really powerful stuff. So again, I'm not saying that old Doctor Who is Grindhouse, but just because something is old or cheaply made or perceived as throwaway doesn't mean it is. So
you're absolutely right.
Yeah. But
hey, you had asked me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you had asked me what my favorite Grindhouse films were.
Yeah, throw it at me.
And I think if we're throwing out like a really wide umbrella, like say that the Grindhouse Cinema Database does, and we're getting in, all the trashy VHS films and all the B movies and all the homages since. I think we're casting out that. Mine's pretty broad. Like, obviously, the stuff that we've talked about before, there's Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Halloween. These are all classics of the genre that I can watch 1,000 times over. But if I boil it down to, like, what do I really like to watch and rewatch over and over again, it's got to be, I really like Evil Dead 2.
Yep.
That's a great one. If you've ever seen Troll 2.
No, but that makes... Isn't there a documentary about that saying it's the worst movie ever made?
Yeah, well, the documentary is called Best Worst Movie.
Okay.
If you have not, I'm telling you, if you have not experienced Troll 2, then when we're done with this podcast, you put aside whatever you have done, go find it streaming, as I'm sure it's streaming somewhere, and watch it. And then when you have a chance, watch the documentary shortly thereafter, and it will change your perception of everything we've talked about. It'll blow your mind.
So I didn't rush out and watch it immediately. Frantic confession there. But I did watch Troll 2 before I finished editing this episode. And it is, boy, it's a movie. Out of all the movies I've ever seen, it's definitely one of them. I could see it having a certain charm. It is a bad movie, but it's a very watchable bad movie. I went on to watch Worst Bad Movie, or Best Worst Movie, I think is the name of the documentary. You can watch it for free on Tubi. Documentary's very good. It has much more heart than it has any right to be honest. Kind of talking to the different actors, especially the main guy who played the dad. He's just a really super likable guy. Yeah, Troll 2 it's a phenomenon. If you watch this documentary, I mean, it's connected with people on a crazy level. So definitely check it out if you haven't already. I have to say that, upon one viewing, I didn't connect with it on that magical level that it has with a lot of people, but I did enjoy it, and it's very quotable and a lot of fun. I suspect the more you watch it, the more it just builds and builds and builds until it becomes this sort of experience. But it is the definition of a cult classic. There is an entire cult around this movie. So go check out Troll 2 if you haven't already. So is Troll 2, did that have Jennifer Aniston? Am I getting confused?
No, that's Leprechaun.
Leprechaun, okay.
Yeah.
Troll 2. Go watch Troll 2. That has a documentary about it called Best Worst Movie.
Yes. So there's Troll 2, and then if you've never seen Samurai Cop.
Okay.
If you've never seen Samurai Cop, I honestly don't even know where to begin with it as far as the insanity that ensues from the first opening reel to the end. It's so crazy. It's such a bonkers, just absolutely crazy film. Again, without just spoiling the best parts of it, just trust me. Like, even in the slow parts, keep watching. Keep looking for those movie mistakes. Keep looking for those cameos. And then when the bad lines come, it's like something that you can't even believe in.
Cherish them.
It's amazing.
So let me ask you this: since you mentioned Samurai Cop, that made me think of. Here's an example. Like, I would say it's not Grindhouse because it's just this bonkers parody of many things. But like Kung Fury,
Yeah.
Okay, I would you call that, because I'm saying that's its own thing, off being like this wacky parody fun. Would you consider that Grindhouse?
No.
Okay.
So it's funny you bring up Kung Fury because the whole aspect of Grindhouse films that we haven't even touched on are the Shaw Brothers and the Wuxia movies and all the imports that came over and basically changed the entire face of.
Well, right, like the Saturday or Sunday afternoon Kung Fu theater, baby.
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, Bruce Lee and
Yeah.
his popularity began to soar, really made all that possible. But then you had all the movies that were being shown in the these literally in the grindhouses because they were cheap. You could get them for next to nothing, and then you could just show them over and over again. And what they would do is they would take these movies and they would put them in impoverished neighborhoods, and then the people would just fill these theaters. And that's how they turned, they turned a dime on some of these theaters that were.
But then it got into the culture, right? Like,
yeah, there's a great book that just came out about this very thing called "These Fists Break Bricks," and it's pretty much like the book about kung fu and martial arts cinema, going all the way back to like the 20s and 30s, like when you wouldn't even think that you would see that sort of thing in a movie, all the way up until the modern day. Like it's if you're interested in this subject at all, it is absolutely invaluable. It'll be like a feast for your brain. Again, it's called "These Fists Break Bricks."
All right, let me make a note of that.
It's fully illustrated. They've got everything in there. They're dropping Count Dante references. They're talking about all of the Shaw Brothers films and all the BRUCEsploitation. Like after Bruce Lee died, there were all these like exploitation films that were just basically ripping off his likeness. They called it BRUCEsploitation.
Oh my goodness!
You have like Bruce Lee, Bruce Lee, Bruce Lay, and then 1,000 variations on those. But it's just that whole era of Shaw Brothers.
Well, then you had parodies of that because you had, what was it? They Call Me Bruce in the early '80s.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess was kind of a riff on that.
Well, if you get a chance, man, just take a quick look at the logo for Planet X, and you'll see that it's basically a riff off the Shaw Brothers logo.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That very bold P against the. Is it an X against the blue or an?
No, the P. It's a yellow PX against the blue.
The blue
background. It's the same as Shaw Brothers, except it's PX instead of SB.
Yeah, I mean, without the Grindhouse Kung Fu movies, we wouldn't have gotten The Last Dragon, which is one of my favorite movies.
The Last Dragon. I'm so glad you brought that up. Again, I don't feel like that's a Grindhouse movie.
I don't either, but it's definitely a tribute.
For sure, a tribute. But that movie, along with The Warriors, has the best representation of what New York City was like before the Giuliani cleanup. That movie, again, along with The Warriors, is like they take the city so seriously that it's like a whole extra character in the movie. So the other biggest character behind Bruce Leroy is New York.
And that's something that, again, the new Ghostbusters Afterlife movie was not Grindhouse, but I felt the lack of New York City. Like, I feel like that if you're going to make a Ghostbusters movie, that New York City is a character just like the Enterprise is a character in a Star Trek episode. It's just
that's a very, very good point. You're absolutely right.
So, but evidently the next Ghostbusters movie, they're taking them back to New York City. So, but anyway, Ghostbusters I would not categorize as Grindhouse by any means.
Oh, good Lord, no.
Yeah, but even you were talking about the BRUCEsploitation. Even in The Last Dragon, the main character renamed himself Bruce Leroy. And of course you had Sho'nuff, Shogun, and I'm stretching here. I'm just shooting from the hip, but I feel like that you're talking about that they were playing these movies in these impoverished neighborhoods, so these sensibilities of the movies got into those neighborhoods, and I think that could have been reflected in. You've got a villain calling himself the Sho'nuff Shogun, running around in a gritty New York neighborhood. So, but anyway, if you've never seen, obviously I'm talking to listeners here. If you've never seen The Last Dragon, you've got to go check it out. It's a wonderful example of an almost perfect '80s movie. And of course, I think the bad guy is like a cable TV dude or something. There for a while, the uh, record producers and TV producers and stuff became villains in the movies. So,
yeah, it's right as the time of like cocaine consumerism, like American Psycho is sort of like villainous type of guys was really at its height. You know, that Gordon Gekko sort of idea of a bad guy. But the real star of Last Dragon to me is not Bruce Leroy. It's not Timac. It's Sho'nuff. The Shogun of Harlem.
Yeah,
I mean, he is hands down to me one of the top 5 villains in Grindhouse cinema. Period, and that includes Michael Myers. That includes Leatherface.
See, I'm a big Michael Myers fan, so we might have to talk about that. But Sho'nuff Shogun, he just owns the screen.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. He is when he's on screen, you cannot take your eyes off it. He is. Yeah. He has like 16 minutes in the whole entire movie.
Yeah, he's not in it very much. Yeah,
but he is one of he's like the Darth Vader of exploitation films. He's awesome.
I was fixing to say he's a very Darth Vader figure, and of course he's the challenge that forces Bruce Leroy to rise to the occasion and achieve the glow.
Of course.
Yeah. So
who's the master?
Yeah, so good. I think I'm just gonna have to go watch that again today because it's such a great movie.
Troll 2 first.
Troll 2, and then The Last Dragon. So tell me about like those kung fu. I love those cheesy kung fu movies that would, it's the lips were out of sync with the dubbing, and such great memories.
Almost all of them.
Yeah, or you had the crazy stuff like the guy throwing the hat that would chop your head off, and
that's was it Master of the Flying Guillotine?
Yeah, just great stuff. And then it looks like on Grindhouse database looks like a couple of these kung fu movies made it in. One was the Master of the Flying Guillotine. Another one that I see popping up a lot is Five Fingers of Death. Which that gets referenced a lot. You got a band called Five Finger Death Punch, and then you've got, of course, in Kill Bill Volume 2, it's directly referenced. There's a five finger punch or something like that will kill you.
5 finger death touch.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So, and of course, I mean, you've mentioned Quentin Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino is unabashedly a Grindhouse fan. Up to and including where he, I consider Kill Bill a massive Grindhouse homage or whatever.
It's a masterpiece.
I saw Kill Bill Volume 1 in the theater, and I mean, it blew me away. I walked out ready to walk right back in, and like everybody else I saw it with was kind of like, I was ready to walk right back up and buy a ticket and go right back into it. It was amazing. Part 2 is still very good, but Part 1 just blows me away.
I think Part 2 is actually the better film, personally.
Well, Part 2 is more of a movie. Part 1 is more of a experience. I don't know how to.
So Part 2 has my favorite fight scene in any movie. Period. It's where the bride and Elle Driver have the face off in the trailer.
Yeah,
that's my favorite fight scene in any movie, and I rank it right up there with like the church scene in the Kingsman.
Oh, that scene!
I rank it up there with the hallway, the hammer hallway scene in Old Boy.
Yeah, I was gonna ask how you thought that compared.
Raid, the stairwell scene in Daredevil. I mean, all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, there's that scene in the Daredevil series that's very inspired by or whatever the Old Boy fight.
That's in season 1 now. In season 2, they have the stairwell fight where he goes and confronts all the bikers in the stairwell.
Okay, I haven't. Believe it or not, I haven't seen season 2. I watched season 1 with my wife, but we've never kept going with it. I want to. We're in an embarrassment of riches on TV and movies right now. It's hard to keep up with.
Very much so.
Yeah.
That's why when I see people on Facebook just complaining about the latest Star Wars movie or the Thor Ragnarok was too funny or what. I get out of here because
there's so much.
There's so much that you have all this sugar and you're being so salty.
It really is an embarrassment of riches. It's another golden era of TV. People thought streaming time-shifting TiVo was going to kill TV, but no, it just forced people to make better stuff to keep the eyeball on it.
I mean, just think about what we got only in the last few months. We got a Kenobi series. We got a Boba Fett series. We got The Boys. We have the end of Peaky. We have like the final season of Peaky Blinders. You have Better Call Saul.
Better Call Saul is one of the best TV shows ever made.
It's better than Breaking Bad.
It's way better than Breaking Bad, in my opinion. I mean, Breaking Bad was groundbreaking, amazing TV. But I would rank Better Call Saul as I get chills thinking about Better Call Saul. I love Better Call Saul.
It's a fantastic show.
Such a good show. Let me kind of take it back to Grindhouse. So would you, like, I'm a huge fan of like the 60s and 70s Godzilla movies and kaiju movies. So would you consider those Grindhouse?
No, although I would consider them Grindhouse adjacent, obviously, because they did see play in the old Grindhouse theaters. I mean, not all of them, but some of them did show up. But there's obviously a similar aesthetic between some of the entries in Grindhouse cinema and with the Godzilla stuff, and like going back to our how not all Grindhouse films are pieces of bubblegum pop, like the original Godzilla had very serious themes, Well,
it was a psychological reaction to Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Only later did you see kind of the embarrassment of riches when it came to the crazy kaiju. That was only later did you get all that.
But the original Godzilla movie is a horror movie. I mean, you can watch it as a sci-fi movie, but from a Japanese perspective, that's a horror movie. And then it's interesting because Godzilla, the first Godzilla, was basically talking about an atom bomb going off. That was the subtext. And then, have you seen Shin Godzilla?
Oh yeah, listen, man. I love kaiju and monster movies and Godzilla so much. I wrote a 148-page module about kaiju. So I'm way deep into it, man.
Okay, well, so Shin Godzilla was a national reaction or a reaction to how they handled was it Fukushima nuclear power plant situation. It was, if you watch it through that lens, you have an emerging situation that the government is just mishandling left and right. Some of it because the bureaucracy just doesn't know how to handle it. Some of it because people are more worried about saving face than they are doing a good job. And if you watch Shin Godzilla from that perspective, that's exactly what they're talking about. So it's pretty interesting, And that movie, not only is it a great movie, but it kind of transcended. Like it won. Not only, I think it was either the or one of the grossing movies in Japan the year it came out, but it won their equivalent of the Academy Award. So you can use kaiju and Godzilla for, although I love to watch giant monsters beat the crap out of each other, like Godzilla versus Kong, the new one. I want to see a giant giant monkey punch a lizard. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, same.
But if you want to go deeper and have subtext and all this stuff, kaiju can handle it. You can tell a pretty powerful story with kaiju as the ostensible, story, but with subtext underneath.
One more thing when you mention kaiju is like I don't even think that kaiju when you have a story about kaiju, I don't even know that they need to be the main focus of thing. I think a lot of times kaiju work better in the way that zombies work in the Walking Dead. Okay, so in the Walking Dead, zombies aren't the biggest problem. It's other people. But I mean, you have children that can take out the zombies, and I think kaiju at large, they're really just an environmental disaster because it isn't like kaiju are singling out certain people and trying to stomp on them. we're just like insects or mice running beneath your feet,
Right.
So they work better to me as an environmental challenge or something that can be turned against your players, or something that can be, if you're watching a movie that they're the result of you having done something bad.
One other, I guess, type of grindhouse movie that I want to touch on here is the giallo, the Italian.
Oh yeah.
So I wouldn't have thought of this as grindhouse because, like, Argento makes pretty artistic move. You know what I mean? I don't think of the grindhouse, but maybe the way they came to America was through the grindhouse circuit. I don't know. But
That's exactly it. That's exactly why they're considered that, is because with the way that they came over here and were introduced to American audiences was in grindhouse cinema.
Okay, because in Italy, I don't think they're considered, or at least a lot of those movies are considered like high or good movies or whatever. So, a lot of
them are great movies.
Yeah. Well, the one that keeps making the grindhouse list is Suspiria.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I just watched Joe Bob just covered one of his movies. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was pretty good. It was about a writer whose murders from his books were getting reenacted. I can't remember the name of it, but it was pretty darn good. So the name of the Dario Argento movie I was trying to remember is Tenebra. I think I'm saying that right. It's Tenebrae. And the last drive-in episode with Joe Bob Briggs that he shows that movie and gives his usual very interesting and insightful commentary on it is currently on Shudder. If you have the Shudder streaming service, you could go check it out. I didn't do that on purpose, but Joe Bob he'll say, Joe Bob says, check it out. So Shane Plays says, check it out on Joe Bob. So you can hear Joe Bob say, Joe Bob says, check it out. And I think that's another kind of subgenre of grindhouse is movies that in their own country, they're not considered, whatever, but like you pointed out, the way they made it into America. It's just like one of the reasons New Wave got popular and all these British artists got popular in the 80s was because MTV was just starting and they could get these British videos cheaply. So they were just running that stuff on MTV because they needed content and they could get it relatively cheaply. But then all of a sudden it became popular, So anyway, you mentioned Evil Dead 2, Troll 2, and Samurai Cop. Are there any other movies you want to throw out there real quick before you got to go?
Well, Killer Clowns from Outer Space, of course. I think that again, a vastly underrated film. Chiodo Brothers for life. Those guys are.
What's the name of it? For life? Chiodo Brothers for life?
No. Chiodo Brothers is they're the folks who made Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right.
I like the Duffer Brothers of the '80s. Yeah, listen. If you just go online and start poking around and looking, and you're going to find Rock and Roll Nightmare. You're going to find Exterminator 2. You're going to end up with Hills Have Eyes. You're going to find all kinds of dirty, grimy little pictures, or just you're going to find the Video Dead or Terror Vision or any of those kind of.
You're going to find Demons and Demons 2 also from Italy.
That's right.
You're going to find nuns with guns. You're going to find Foxy Brown. You're going to find all kinds of crazy stuff. So
the 36 Chamber of Shaolin, you can't beat it.
You can't. But yeah, there's a lot of wonderful stuff out there that is not slick, is not, and that's part of its attraction and part of its charm. Of course, there's one of the most famous revenge movies ever made, I Spit on Your Grave. There's so much stuff out there. So, and as Levi mentioned earlier, know what you're getting into, because some of this stuff can be really brutal and in your face, and deal with themes that, you may not want your 10-year-old kid, like, hey, let's go watch this old movie, son. No, you don't. No, don't do that.
Yeah, it's hard to watch a film like Lady Snowblood or They Call Her One Eye or something like that, Thriller in the United States, that without without having to put out that warning first, because those are rough flicks to watch if you're unprepared.
Yeah. So would you consider the original, last question, and it's not all just horror movies, but would you consider the original Friday 13th Grindhouse? I know it was definitely independent.
No, I don't think I would, actually. I think I really throw that more in because here's the thing: is that movie came out at just the right time when they were looking for slashers.
And I have to throw a footnote here that Black Christmas doesn't get enough respect for kind of kicking off what we think of as the slashers of the 70s and the 80s. But anyway, go ahead.
Black Christmas and Halloween was a big one. But then right as the studios were starting to look for more of these slashers, boom, they had Friday the 13th. And instead of making its start in little grindhouse theaters or little crappy, shoddy theaters throughout the country, it got the full court press right off the bat. So while it didn't cost very much to make, it got promoted like one of the big boys. And it just as soon as it caught on, man, it became a phenomenon. I think they had a sequel to it. And I want to say in less than a year, there was a sequel.
Yeah,
so
that was quick. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just, to me, it doesn't really fit the criteria. But maybe if it had grown from word of mouth, or it had spent some time in those low budget theaters, then maybe. But to me, under my personal definitions, it just misses the mark.
Okay, fair enough. Well, folks, go to shaneplays.com, and I'll have show notes for this episode, and I'll have links to the database, the Grindhouse database, 20 best so you can kind of look through and start your journey here. We barely scratched the surface. There's
yeah, we did.
Yeah, it's so I mean, I'm looking at some here I've never even heard of. It's number 18 on our top 20 called Vampiros Lesbos from 1970. I have no idea. So I have that
on DVD.
Well, there you go. You're a true Grindhouse fan. Okay. Well, Levi, I gotta end this with the bad joke of the week. It has to happen. So with your Grindhouse movie love, this should not be too much of a psychic damage to you. But here we go. What do you call a cow with no legs?
Ground beef.
That is true, sir. Yes. Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner. What do you call a cow with 3 legs?
Tri-tip.
Lean beef. Lean beef. The correct answer was lean beef. Folks, don't forget, it's Levi Combs. Check out Planet X Games for the best in RPG products and zines. All right, Levi, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Shane.
Oh, man, so glad to have you. Yeah, we'll catch everyone else next time on Shane Plays Geek Talk. Thanks so much for listening to Shane Plays Geek Talk. I certainly hope you enjoyed this journey into the things we love. For your convenience, show notes with helpful links for each episode can always be found at shaneplays.com. You can catch the podcast in several places, including on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, Podbean, Amazon Music, Verbal, YouTube, and more. If you like what you hear and would like to support Shane Plays Geek Talk, you can do so for as little as $1 per episode on Patreon at patreon.com/ShanePlays. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. Stay geeky, my friends.